I'm delighted to welcome you all here to Holyrood for International Women's Day. We're meeting today to discuss the broad theme of the influence of women, and I'm pleased to say that we will be hearing from some very influential women in the course of today's event. Our influential speakers include the Deputy First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Margaret Curran, and Maria Fyfe, former MP, who has campaigned for the equal representation of women in the UK and Scottish Parliaments. And we will also have a unique Danish perspective from Mette, Kindberg, President of the Uni World Europe Women's Committee. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to a special contribution from our Scotsmaker, Liz Lochhead. Of course, aside from our official influential speakers, this chamber today is full of women having an influence in all walks of life: teachers, doctors, lawyers, mothers, daughters, sisters. So welcome to everyone. Later on in the afternoon, after a short break, I'll be chairing a debate on women in the workplace, and this debate will contribute to the inquiry that's being undertaken by the Parliament's Equal Opportunities Committee. And members of that committee are in attendance today, and I'm sure they will be paying very close attention to the debate.
The theme for this year's event is the influence of women, and I don't think women really do acknowledge or appreciate the inspiration that they or we have on others around us in all walks of life. And our speakers, by the dint that they're here, are women of influence, and women have influenced us. But I'm just going to say a couple of names on a personal level. I mean, women undertake many roles in their lives: mother, partner, carer, employee, friend. Within these roles are also other attributes: time management, financial management, knowledge, compassion and understanding. And far too often these are the attributes that we have that seem to go under the radar. And on a day-to-day basis, I can think of women around me every day, women like Anne Scullion, Caroline Thompson, who just, no matter how bad it gets, in the place where we work, who just get on with it. And I'm not going to say where I work just now, but we'll do that afterwards. But women like Evelyn Fraser, Development Manager, is so inspirational for those around her. Anne Henderson, Jane Mackay, Mary Alexander, a woman in my own union, who puts in so many hours to help other women. But how often do you think about these things when you're taking the children to school, juggling work, home life, caring for an elderly relative or so on? We need to start to believe that we can inspire. If we look at other women who inspire us, we have to accept, acknowledge and work at inspiring our daughters and our sons to become better and make our society better. So the Scottish Women's Convention, through its roadshows and events like this, meets many, many women who bring their stories to us that we document and use and send on to politicians to try and help them change and influence the policies that affect their lives. And by bringing individual women and groups together in a relaxed and informal setting, we get discussions that are on concerns that are important to them. And yes, WC is very proud to provide that platform that helps women to do that in a safe and caring environment.
We don't expect this chamber to be 100% full of women, but we do expect, and we should expect, and we should keep fighting for this chamber to be at least 50% full of women. And we've got a long way to go in that, and all of us, every political party, my own included, has its role to play in making sure that happens. Yeah, there are differences of opinion about how you do it. Those differences of opinion exist between parties, they exist within political parties, but for the purposes of today, I think the important thing is to rededicate ourselves to that ambition and to say loudly and clearly that we will not rest until women are here in this chamber and chambers alike around the world in the numbers we deserve to be. And this event here today helps to remind us of that and I suppose give us strength as we carry on. I want to also today congratulate the Scottish Women's Convention and in particular Agnes and the team of people Agnes works with. This is a fabulous organisation, an organisation that's marking its 10th anniversary, which in itself is a big achievement, but an organisation that's got 30,000 members. You've got a very ambitious work programme. You're represented at UK level on things like the shadow mechanisms for both the United Nations Convention on the Status of Women, the Convention to Eliminate Discrimination Against Women, making sure that the voice of Scottish women is heard in these very important forums. And the organisation of this event every year, which takes a lot of work, I know, but has become a very special date in the calendar. So for all of that, Agnes, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to you and your team, and a huge congratulations for everything that you do. As I said a minute ago, I love this event. It's probably one of my favourite events of the year. But I also really love and value International Women's Day, which we celebrated yesterday. And it's great over the years, even over the years I've been coming to this event in this Parliament, to see how International Women's Day has become more important and is every year, I think, more recognised, as it should be. It's a really important date in the calendar. It's really significant. It's really symbolic. And I think it's important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it gives us the opportunity to do something that's very important, maybe something in Scotland we don't do often enough, and that is celebrate progress and celebrate achievement. You know, the fact that I can stand here today as a member of this Parliament, as the Deputy First Minister, the fact that the leaders' chairs in both these opposition benches are occupied by women, the fact that our presiding officer, one of our deputy presiding officers, is female, that's a sign of huge progress. And we should be proud of that, and we should celebrate that. And International Women's Day gives us the opportunity just to remind ourselves how far we've come. But it also is an important opportunity, and perhaps this is the more important bit of it, to remind ourselves how much further we still have to go. Because there are still challenges there, there are barriers to be taken down, hurdles to be overcome, and every year this day gives us the opportunity to rededicate ourselves to that. We know that at home we still got challenges of underrepresentation, not just in this chamber but on boards and public bodies across the country. We've still got a pay gap. We've still got occupational segregation. There is still too much violence against women, even in our civilised country. And internationally, women are still victims of the most horrendous violence, rape, genital mutilation. Women in many parts of the world still don't have the right to vote. They don't have access to education. They don't even have the kind of representation that we value, albeit we want more. So there are big challenges still ahead, and we have a duty, particularly those of us who are in privileged positions. We have a duty never to forget those challenges and never stop fighting to overcome these challenges. And we have a duty to do it for the women of today, for those of us in here and for the many more outside of this chamber today. But you know, we also have a duty to do it for future generations.
But it is the 10th anniversary of the Scottish Women Convention, and I am at that stage in my life where I hear myself saying to people, my God, that's it 10 years, I can't believe it's 10 years. But there's one plea I would want to make as we reflect on that, and I've been thinking about this, reflecting about the establishment of the Scottish Parliament. You know, when I'm here with Maria Fyfe and Agnes, Maria, a Labour MP at the time, who worked so hard to help establish that Parliament, that we have to make sure that we don't make the mistake that I think generations before us made, and that was somehow women get written out of the history books. You know, for anybody who's looked at taking history seriously at all, there is a real struggle to actually begin to say, actually, women made quite a big contribution to this as well. And I think we've got to do that about the history of the Scottish Parliament. You know, this, particularly today, in this brilliant building, we'll not talk about the cost of that, we'll just pull a blind over that one. But this fantastic Parliament, and of course we should talk about the big figures in that Parliament, but we need to talk about the women too, and remember the contribution of women like Agnes and Maria, who worked so hard, and many other, and I would have to say, forgive me, but particularly the women in the Scottish trade union movement, who did so much to argue the case for gender equality, who said you cannot have a proper Parliament unless it properly reflects the interests of the people it set out to represent. And you can't do that if it's predominantly male. You have to have women in it. And the 50-50 campaign was one of the most important political campaigns in Scotland in recent time. So, sisters, let's not forget the 50-50 campaign. We need to keep fighting about it. And I've got a job to do in Westminster about that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But let's make sure that we write that into our own history and we celebrate that. And we do understand that unless you get a wee bit tough, unless you insist, women's rights often fall off the agenda. And I know we had to make sure, we fought tooth and nail and created the means to make sure that we got women to be in that Parliament. And I'm very proud that the Labour group then and the Labour group now is 50-50, and that's been a really important achievement in that Parliament. But it's not just about having women there for the sake of it, although that's not bad. I think it makes the place certainly look more interesting and sound more interesting. But it's actually about the work those women do. And the work of that first Parliament and that first government was really important, and it did begin to change the shape of politics. There was groundbreaking work on domestic abuse. In Scotland, we were the first government ever to give direct funding to rape crisis centres. There were new programmes of targeted support for childcare and programmes to help women get back to work. But sometimes, and we need to do this in politics, you need to focus on the realities of life and not just always say, well, look what we've done, and haven't we done well? You need to look at the realities of life for women in Scotland. And I tell you, things are tough just now for women in Scotland. And we need to look at the conditions they find themselves in. From the equal pay gap to proper provision of childcare, from pensions to care, from our living standards to our public services. I would argue we need to galvanise ourselves for the fight again for women's rights, just like we did back in 1999 when we fought to establish the Parliament. Because we have to fight again, I think, to put women's issues centre stage on the political agenda again in Scotland. It is unacceptable that the pay gap in Scotland stands at 18%, and it's even higher when you talk about older women. And it's unacceptable that rape convictions in Scotland are amongst the lowest in Europe. And some of the things we do well-meaning things, and actually there's things where there is political consensus, but sometimes if you don't actually think about women, you don't get those solutions right. And an example is the modern apprenticeship scheme. And we would all support that, I think. I don't think it's been an issue of political contention particularly. But if you don't think that through about how it's impacting women, actually that can help boys more than it helps girls, and it can help men more than it helps women. And actually there is some evidence to suggest that that's the case. Professor Ailsa Mackay has said there are alarm bells about this, because actually what it could do, and again it's not malevolence that drives this, it's just because people haven't thought it through. It's actually contributed more to segregation in the workplace rather than challenging segregation in the workplace. So it shows that you need women there to actually make sure you don't make these mistakes. And we need to think about women in work and women in the economy much more. As Professor Mackay said, and it's a quote from Ailsa Mackay, equality in work is not just an issue of social justice, but also an issue of economic efficiency. Equalities boost economies and inequalities act as a drag.
I'm looking around this chamber today and thinking how fantastic it is to be talking to this huge number of women and about the things that concern us all. And I feel very honoured indeed to have been asked by Agnes to do so. And I'd like to add my own congratulations to Agnes and the Convention for the work they've done this past 10 years, because it's really fantastic to see what you have done, and I don't know how you find the time to do it. I really don't. Well, let me begin. I once saw a cartoon, and I don't remember where it was published, that showed a boardroom table with several men and one woman sitting around it. And the boss man is saying to the woman, "Great idea, Miss Smith. Now can we have one of the men to propose it?" And that, my friends, is how the history books get written all too often. Being here today with you today in our Scottish Parliament brings me to our own country's recent history. I have read quite a number of books about the road to devolution and the forming of our Scottish Parliament in 1999. Very few even mention the issue of women's equal representation, or if they do, only in a line or two, or the high degree of success that was achieved. None mention the way the STUC Women's Committee that Margaret has mentioned, and the women in politics who took up this banner, like Margaret and Joanne and others, fought a hard fight against everything that was thrown at them. Only one of these books describes the machinations to attempt to scupper the women within the Scottish Constitutional Convention itself, which was organised to work towards achieving this Parliament. So if some future historian relies on such accounts, then he or she is going to believe that all of a sudden, for no discernible reason, suddenly women took a great leap forward and there they were in large numbers compared to the House of Commons. But of course we know it wasn't like that. I well remember some of the arguments that were put up. I myself was frequently asked by male colleagues, but do we have enough women of the right calibre? To which I was fond of replying, not sure how bad do you have to be?
Every country have the same problems I would want to talk here about, but on different levels. I know that Nicola has talked before me about the gender pay gap is a problem. We have in my country 80% in the gender pay gap. It's not acceptable. We have to do something about it. We have to do something about it together. We have to force just not the trade unions, because we have to take in our negotiations. We have every time we go to negotiations with the public sector, with the companies, we have to talk about gender pay gap. We have to close it. We need to close it. But we also need the governments, because they have to give us the statistic material. They have to give us the way to see on the companies, is here a gender pay gap? Then we have to help from them, because the companies need to have to give them to us so we can see it, so we can take it with us in the negotiations. It is a problem that we have a gender pay gap, because the women have not the same money to buy for. They have not the same issues in their life as men has. If you have a lower salary, you also have lower money to buy for. You cannot buy a flat if you are alone. A man can perhaps buy a flat. If you look about a long life, it's about, you can say in my country, it's about 2 million coins. And if you divide it with 8, it's you have in your own pound. It's what the gender pay gap, about 18% will give. So it's really many money that you left. It's not because it's not just when you are working. It's also when you're going to be old. I'm just going to start to look at my pension, because my age is now, I'm not so many years back at the labor markets, so now I need to look at my pension. And I can see, because I have a lower salary, I also have a lower pension than the men have. So we have to close the pay gap. Women are often works in the service sector. There's not full-time job in the service sector. So if you not have full-time job, you also have a lower salary. You have also a lower wage to live for. So then we have to force also the trade unions. We also have to force for the right to a full-time job. So that women can have a full-time job they can live off. It's the reason. If we have the problems in the public sector there, we can say to the governments, you have to say if you have a free job, you have to say it must be a full-time job, so that women can seek it.
Women rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. Women tattle and titter. Women prattle. Women waffle and witter. Men talk. Men talk. Women into girl talk about women's trouble. Trivia and small talk. They yap and they babble. Men talk. Men talk. Women gossip, women giggle, women niggle, niggle, niggle. Men talk. Women yatter, women chatter, women chew the fat, women spill the beans. Women ain't been taking the also good advice in them women's magazines. A man likes a good listener. Oh yeah, I like a woman who likes me enough not to nitpick, not to nag, and not to interrupt, because I call that treason. A woman with the good grace to be struck dumb by my sweet reason. Yeah, remember, a man likes a good listener. Yes, a real man likes a real good listener. Women yap, yap, yap. Verbal diarrhea is a female disease. Woman, she spreads, she rumours around, she like Philadelphia cream cheese. Oh, bossy women gossip and girlish women giggle. Women natter, women nag, women niggle, niggle, niggle. Men talk. Men think first and speak later? Oh yeah, men talk. Men, says my boss, are definitely more dependable. And though even in these days of equal pay, a man tends to come that wee bitty more expensive due to the added responsibility a man tends to have in his job specification. Well, for instance, you can depend on a man not to get pregnant. My boss says men are more objective. Catch a man bitching about health hazards or conditions, or going out on strike over no paper towels on the toilet, or nagging over the lack of day nursery facilities. My boss says, as far as he's concerned, a creche is a motor accident in Kelvinside, and any self-respecting woman should have a good man to take care of her. So it's only pin money she's working for, and that's bound to come out in the attitude. Well, a man isn't subject to moods or premenstrual tension. A guy isn't going to phone in sick with some crap about cramps. My boss says bloke phones in with an upset stomach, and you know either he means a hangover or else his brother managed to get him tickets for Wembley. You know where you are with a man. I'm 65 years old. These pieces of irony, I've always known that it was the most ridiculous thing in the world that there was gender inequality. I was brought up by both my mother and my father to believe that, and it seemed to me utterly ridiculous and therefore only worth laughing about. But unfortunately, the little ironies I've just kind of shared with you are just as relevant 30-something years more on from when I wrote them. And it would be depressing if only there weren't so many wonderful young women here today. And like everybody else here who's happy to call themselves a feminist, we all do get depressed about how sometimes we feel that younger women feel that all the fights have been won. They haven't. Feminism is like hoovering. It's got to be done all over again. Of course, everybody's mother, always and so on, always, 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 never, never loved you enough or too smothering much. Of course, you were the only one. Your mother, a machine that shat out siblings. Listen, everybody's mother was the original Frigidaire ice queen, clunking out the hard stuff in nuggets, mirror slivers and ice splinters that'd stick in your heart. Absolutely everyone's mother was artistic when she was young. Everyone's mother was a perfumed presence in pearls, remote white shoulders when she leant over and kissed you in your crib. Everybody's mother slept with the butcher for sausages to stuff you with. Everybody's mother mythologised herself. You got mixed up between dragon's teeth and black market stockings. Naturally, she failed to give you positive feelings about your own sorry sprouting body. It was a bloody shame, but she did sit up all night sewing sequins on your carnival costume so you would have a good time. And she spat on the corner of her hanky and scraped at your mouth with sour lace till you squirmed so you would look smart. So, where was your father all this time? Away at the war or in his office or anyway conspicuous for his absence. So, what if your mother did float around above you, big as a barrage balloon, blocking out the light? Nobody's mother can't not never do nothing right. Thank you very much.